to the What Really Happened radio show. Because World War III is a really bad idea. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Thursday, February 11th, 2016. A little reminder to all of those out there with loves in their life. Sunday's Valentine's Day, so you need to be getting the flowers and the cards and everything else going right now. Sure happy it's Thursday. We've got a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645, 877-300-7645. Tom is in our control room, twiddling the dials and keeping us out of trouble, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. We're going to talk about the economy right off the top because obviously that is on everybody's mind. Today on the American market, the Dow was down over 300 at one point. There was a very obvious attempt to shove it back up by the plunge protection team to the close, but it didn't take because people understand that's what's being done. The markets are being rigged. The underlying value of the stocks are not there, and every time the plunge protection team shoves the market back up, investors say, okay, now's the time for me to bail. They're selling the rallies. That's what's going on. And by the way, I'm not the only person who's pointing this out. There was an article over in Zero Hedge talking about the very strange spike in the middle of the day yesterday, saying that the central banks are getting desperate. The interventions are becoming very, very obvious. You'd have to be on drugs not to notice them. And they're having to do this. And I don't think that they think they're fooling anybody any longer. But what's going on is all of these banks involved in the plunge protection team now hold huge blocks of overvalued stocks on their books. When the market corrects, not if, but when the market corrects, they're going to be instantly insolvent overnight. So they're just going to keep on trying to rig this up as much as possible. But, you know, we're down into the 15,000s again on the Dow, from over 17,000 just a short while ago, and people are getting nervous around the globe. Let's grab a quick phone call here. Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike, the fundamentals are not down. The only thing mental is Washington, D.C. and Britain and the money junkies.
That's absolutely true.
Period.
That's absolutely true.
People need to get their SHIT in order because what you're seeing since January is the beginning of the end.
Yes.
This is it. You know, Mike, I went on CNBC. If you look at gold and the 5-year chart, something happened in November, December 2015. I know there was a emergency meeting. Obviously, nobody's going to know what it was about because it's probably a national security thing. But if you look at the chart, though, from between January and February now, that gold spike tells you everything of everybody's going into gold as a safe haven. This tells you everything you need to know of that's the last safe haven, period.
Oh, well, the financial corporate media has been saying, gold is a barbarous relic. It's left over from Keynesian economics, and you don't want it. It's heavy, and the game has been to basically keep people their money in the savings accounts or in the stock market where the money junkies can play with it. And people are taking their money out. And by the way, I'm going to repeat one more time what we have been telling you for years. You should have no more money in the bank than you need to cover your immediate obligations, and you should have the rest at home, some in cash, some in metals, under your own control. Remember what happened in Cyprus when they had the haircut over there, the scalping or the castration, whatever you want to call it from your point of view. There was no warning. People just got up one morning, and all of a sudden the ATMs wouldn't give them their money. They couldn't get their money out of the banks. It will happen without any advance warning when they decide they think they need to steal your money to keep their friends on Wall Street going just a little bit longer.
Exactly. If people are expecting Washington, D.C. or Fox News, CNBC, MSNBC to tell you the day to go out and buy gold and silver and to protect yourselves, they're not going to tell you. You people who are listening need to do it for yourselves because we're in a very bad situation when it comes to that, the wars, because it's all interconnected, and people just need to stop sitting around and waiting for somebody on TV to tell them because they're not going to.
No, they're not. I mean, the corporate media is there to serve their corporate owners. And right now, everybody in corporate finance in Washington, D.C., they're looking out for their own future welfare. They could care less about you. In fact, they'd probably sleep better at night if all of a sudden the 99% simply vanished and they could, cheat each other for money from now on just as kind of a hobby. But, yeah, they're not going to take care of you. And the news is just alarming all over the place. Anyway, Dustin, very busy day. I'm going to let you go. Thank you for the phone call. We're going to switch over to Mo in Florida. Aloha, Mo. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. Thank you for taking my call. I was essentially, I'll try to stay on topic. You're talking about gold, and I was thinking back in the 30s when they confiscated it. You know, most people didn't turn it in. And they got about, I guess, I've heard estimates, they got half, you know, safety deposit box, whatever. But I was just thinking, you know, back then, if they took somebody's gold, if they did go to somebody's door, which they really didn't do, but if they did, it would get around very slowly, and they control the message, the newspapers. But, you know, today, if that were to happen, the very first person that the government or whoever came in, the brown shirts, whatever you want to call, and they tried to take somebody's gold, that would be on the Internet immediately, and the only metal they'd be collecting is lead.
Yes. I'm afraid that you are absolutely right at that, and of course at that point the government would have its excuse to declare a national emergency and confiscate the guns and confiscate all the metal and ban cash, because that's where they're aiming, where you are absolutely helpless and all of your money is under the control of the money junkies. I mean, they already see it as all their money because they created it out of thin air, then loaned it to you, so it's not really yours. And that's their attitude. That they have the authority to manage the economy for themselves. Now, back in 1933, as you say, about half, I heard two-thirds of Americans did turn in their gold out of a sense of loyalty, patriotic duty, and they were convinced that it really was best for the nation as a whole, and of course it was not. It was what was best for Wall Street to get out of their self-created mess, and Wall Street wanted to end the gold standard, to break free of having to tie their ink and paper to any kind of a commodity. And that was part of this whole machination to force Roosevelt to go along with ending the gold standard. And so, you know, today, of course, if you are buying physical metals in any kind of a sizable amount, there is a paper record. They know who bought it and who's got it.
Yeah, they can't get it. Most of those people bought gold, bought guns, too, and they know what's up. But thanks, Michael.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over real quick here to, well, actually, Adam, I'm going to put you on hold because I want to finish the economic news before we talk about Syria again. Now, a lot of attention is being pointed on Deutsche Bank right now because despite all of the creative bookkeeping Deutsche Bank is doing to try and look like they're solid, Deutsche Bank right now today has a negative net worth of 238 billion euros with a B. In other words, Deutsche Bank is already technically insolvent. It's being propped up by the government saying, yeah, keep going. We don't have a choice. But we're seeing articles from all over the place, like in Investment Research Dynamics. The Deutsche Bank is a complete joke. And it's pointing out that Deutsche Bank's bond buyback program is just a big propaganda stunt, because it's actually eroding their own liquidity. And buying back bonds is a non-cash generating event. It's being done to make it look like Deutsche Bank is still in control of what's going on, and they're absolutely not. I got some email from somebody who said that Deutsche Bank has been holding funds transfers going through it for as long as 5 weeks, and that's a red warning sign. I had a friend who worked for the U.S. branch of Deutsche Bank. Sadly, he's no longer with us. And he was just saying from the inside, everybody knew that this was on a dead end to nowhere. So let's see. Deutsche Bank burns. This is, again, from Investment Research Dynamics. Deutsche Bank burns. Silver is the trade of the decade. Silver's actually outperforming gold at this point. But whether you're into silver or gold or any kind of a commodity that can hold value, platinum, tantalum, palladium, even copper at this point. We got to take a break for commercials. We'll be back with more about the economy and phone calls after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking about the economy, and even the economic press is saying, you know, this is going to be it. China Bank losses may be 4 times as great as they were during the subprime crisis. Deutsche Bank is sitting on $55 trillion of derivatives, obligations. Hedge fund managers are saying some banks are simply going to vanish. They're going to drop to zero. They're paper stock certificates if you actually got the paper certificate. Going to be a useful decoration on a wall, and that's going to be about it. The U.S. debt is on track to break $30 trillion with a T dollars. Now, all over the world, everybody's saying we've got to have negative interest rates, and they're talking like, -4% and -5% interest rates on your savings accounts. Basically, they steal from you when your money is in their bank, and they're passing laws to say that it's legal. But there's a little bit of a wrinkle. The chairperson of the Federal Reserve, Janet Yellen, in testifying before Congress, actually revealed that under U.S. law, negative rates are illegal. I'm sure Congress will correct that very, very quickly because, the banks are much more important than human beings. Human beings, we have way too many of those already, but we must preserve those precious banks. Now, what's really going on here is a crisis of confidence all around the world. Even at the top of the hour, they say, oh, it's the oil, it's this and that. No, everybody is starting to look closely at those private central banks and realize, first of all, that they never existed to serve the people and the countries in which they are hosted. They serve themselves, and they are not actually managing the economy other than for their own gain. And there's a huge crisis of confidence. There's an article over in Hat4 UK, WordPress, as the big sell-off continues. Why is anyone surprised that the markets doubt the U.S. Federal Reserve? They're running out of tricks. Another story from Armstrong Economics. The game is over. Market perspective. The fuse has been lit. The world as we have known it is coming undone. Now, J.P. Morgan came out with a comment saying this morning we're seeing the two things the markets hate the most. Actually, it's three things. Equities are tumbling, gold and silver gaining and becoming very attractive. So people are pulling their money out of the stock market and the savings accounts, and they're getting into metals. And oil is plummeting. J.P. Morgan's trading desk was saying it's hard to imagine an uglier morning. And there's nothing hyperbolic about that statement. That's exactly what's going on. There's another wrinkle that's coming up on the oil trade. In order to try and keep the oil industry going, they have been drilling and pumping and storing the oil, and now they're running out of tanks in which to store it, which means when they hit that point, they have to start shutting down the pumps and the pipes and laying the workers off. There's no demand for oil. People don't have jobs to drive to, and if they don't have jobs, they don't have, a reason to drive down to the shopping mall. Bill Holter over at Silver Doctors is saying this could all unravel in as little time as 48 hours. All right, we're going to grab a phone call here from Steve in California. Aloha, Steve. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, the whole concept behind this negative interest rates is those people holding on to their money that pulled it out of the market, put it in savings or whatever, is to get it, to punish them for doing that and then put it back into the market again. That's what they're hoping. But I just wanted to say that I've been graphing the market since February 1st, and it's like clockwork. At 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, you can see, I can show you on a graph where the plunge protection team and a quantitative easing starts right then and there.
Yes.
With that theory of boosting it up, inflating the bubble, it's going to leak. But by the time the market closes, hopefully it's in positive territory. It's like clockwork. At 2 o'clock to 2:15 every day Eastern Standard Time, you can see that.
Yes.
And it doesn't, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It didn't today.
No, more often than not these days, it isn't working because people understand that's what's going on. The plunge protection team has been way too obvious about what they're doing. And again, I don't think their concern is to fool the investors as much as it is to basically keep the Wall Street firms holding all that overvalued stock solvent. Because when there is a correction, and it's only a matter of time before the magic tricks run out, all these firms are going to be instantly insolvent.
Well, you want a good laugh today? Read CNN's the money guy. What's his name? Patrick Gillespie.
Yes.
The article is entitled something about even when the markets are tanking, the economy is looking good, and he's watering this little plant that says jobs. Of course, we know that is not true. What's going on with that? But, I was talking to my wife. I was teaching her about how important the future economic indicator is the Baltic Dry Index, and now we're at the lowest ever in history, 290. It didn't change today. But we went into a couple stores in here. Even the dollar store had a vacancy, shelf vacancy. They were looking at probably 60% inventory on the shelf. There were so many shelves empty. Marshalls and Ross department stores were the same. And she finally said, now it's making sense, this whole Baltic Dry Index, that the tankers, the big container ships coming in to San Francisco are not coming in. They're waiting for more cargo to make that big trip. They're just not going to come over with a little bit. And
because they're losing money at that point.
Yeah. But we're seeing that on our shelves right now.
Yeah, we're seeing it here as well. Prices are going up. Selection is gone. Claire and I are absolutely fed up with Safeway because over the last few months, they stopped selling all the brands we liked and all the things that we wanted to buy, and they've put up replacements that are more expensive but nowhere near as good. So we're abandoning Safeway at this point.
Thanks, Michael.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here, and we're going to switch over to Scott in Wisconsin. Scott, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. How you doing? Aloha. Hey, Michael, I want to explain something here, and then I'll let you comment. Excuse me. It's on if you look at a scale, Michael, you look at the monetary side to the right and the principal to the left. And what's happening is you're definitely right. The principal is just so high when you get car foreclosures, house foreclosures, businesses folding up. The principal goes so high to where we're in the trillions of dollars in debt, and then you have your interest piled on top of that. And when you can't pay your interest on that debt, you're cooked. And that's what's going on, like you said, with these banks around the world. And you said it earlier yesterday, it's fascism. It's a banknote. It's nothing but thin air. It's like if I were to hand you, Michael, a solid bar of brass, that would be monetary because it's there.
Yes.
But the dollar bills and all the CD, all this stuff.
It's a fairy tale.
Ponzi scheme from the beginning.
Okay, Scott, I'm sorry, got to cut you off. We're going to take a commercial break here. Thank you for the phone call. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're talking about the economy, and the indicators are definitely very bad and getting worse. And we're now seeing that people are beginning to realize that maybe some other way of preserving and storing his wealth is a good idea. So we're seeing articles like this one from the Daily Bell. As central banks dim, gold brightens. And, of course, we're hearing from the corporate media, no, you don't, no, gold doesn't do anything, silver doesn't do it. You want to have your money in the stock market, you will make huge amounts of money, which nobody has been, obviously. But they're trying to basically contain this flight from the equities and banks to metals because they're in trouble. I noticed a couple of days ago, History Channel is stripping America's Book of Secrets. And I noticed there was one episode that wasn't in there. All the other episodes were there, being repeated over and over and over again, but the episode on the gold conspiracy was notably absent. Because everything we talked about in that episode is now proving to have been true. We're seeing articles like this one in Investment Watch blog. COMEX silver and gold are still bleeding out from the vaults. People are trying to cash in their paper contracts. And by the way, if you're holding a gold paper contract, you had better get in there as soon as you can because those are leveraged over 570 to 1. That means there are 570 paper ounces of gold in the contracts for every 1 real ounce they've got. So that's why they're running into trouble here. Story coming out of the silverdoctors.com. Over in London, people are lining up to buy gold, physical gold, and the lines are going around the block. Everybody's trying to place orders for the physical. They're going to run out. And all of a sudden, all these places that have their physical gold being stored at the New York Federal Reserve and the Bank of England and the Bank of France are going to say, look, we need it back. And that's when it's all going to start coming apart because it's not there. And by the way, anybody getting any gold bars or coins, you had better check them. Because we know that somebody has been faking bullion bars with tungsten cores for years now. Bars that bear the hallmarks of Fort Knox and the Federal Reserve. Would our government cheat the rest of the world of their gold? Is that a trick question? Another article out of Washington's blog. Central banks are Trojan horses looting their host nations. That's what they do. Private central banks do not serve the nation and its people. They serve themselves. They're very cleverly concealed plundering machines. All right, we're going to take another phone call. Adam in California. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, just kind of stick to the topic that you're talking about here. Do you think what's going on with the banking industry and all that has to do also with last year? I was reading that, you don't really hear anything in the mainstream media, but about all the bankers that were dead last year for the year 2015. It was like 72 high-level bankers, hedge fund managers, a lot of mysterious deaths, just suicides, falling off buildings, going out for bike rides and being hit by cars. And, I think that possibly has a lot to do with it. They saw everything coming, to this point, possibly.
Well, it's sort of a causal relationship because don't forget, at that same time all these bankers were meeting these very strange deaths, Wall Street was under many investigations. I mean, the LIBOR was revealed as being rigged, gold and silver. I mean, all of this fraud was starting to become public, for which a lot of bankers should have gone to prison, like they did in Iceland. And I think the most likely explanation for this rash of deaths is that these were the people who were witnesses, who could connect top executives to the financial skullduggery going on. And that's why they were being eliminated.
And something else that I don't think a lot of people know is that most of these people that did die, the banks had insurance on them, life insurance policies.
Yes.
And one lady that was going to kind of expose it, who worked for a life insurance company, met her in, because she had kind of noticed all these, I guess it's called like a peasant policy or something like that.
Yes.
And they don't have to tell the family, they don't have to tell anybody about it, and they can hold a huge policy on these people. So that's kind of scary,
Yeah, it is when you're working for a corporation that can actually make more money by your death than by your work. That's got to be making a lot of people on Wall Street sweat right now.
Yeah, scary stuff. But that's it, Mike. Thanks a lot.
All right, thank you very much. We're going to let you go here. Now, I want to make a very important point that all of you should be thinking about and talking about in the coming days. Hillary Clinton has shoved the reality of election fraud right in front of the American people's nose. Now, the corporate media is still saying Sanders won New Hampshire by a wide margin, and they're not talking about the delegate count and the political chicanery going on behind the scenes by which Hillary has walked out of New Hampshire with more delegates than Bernie Sanders has. There's still some confusion whether they've got the same number of delegates each or Hillary got 2 more. But considering the popular vote, Hillary shouldn't be anywhere near in the delegate count, and all of this is being arranged by the superdelegates. So we have the superdelegates who are there to basically hijack the will of the voters of that party. You have the massive election fraud, the election machines, all the stuff that was revealed in Iowa, and now Americans understand we don't get to choose our government. So if we are not actually choosing the government, why are we responsible for that government's debt, now close to $30 trillion, not counting the unfunded liabilities of $100 trillion more? You don't get it both ways. If we're not honestly electing our own government, then we're not responsible for the debts of it. And this is over and above the issue of odious debt, which is a recognized principle of international law, that the people of a nation are responsible for debts incurred for the benefit of the people and the nation. Schools, roads, hospitals, that sort of thing. Money borrowed by a government to spy on their own people, to give to other governments, to rig finances, to fight wars is considered odious debt and not the responsibility of the people. Hillary Clinton may have just opened an escape hatch for ordinary Americans to say, hey, we're not responsible for that debt because the government isn't playing by the rules. Just something for you all to think about, and you should be thinking about it. All right, getting on to the candidates. Going into South Carolina, Donald Trump is way ahead in the polls. It's almost looking like the very first America's Cup. When they had the America's Cup and they're waiting for the yachts to show up at the finish line, and they said, who's in first place? Well, it's the America. The Yanks boat. All right, who's in second place? Nobody. There was nobody else on the horizon, and that's what it's looking like going into South Carolina. Now, Hillary Clinton is getting really desperate about her campaign. She's actually come out in one of her speeches saying that her beliefs are aligned with the 10 Commandments. So now she's trying to play the religion card. And she's out there, I'm a Christian, and my beliefs are aligned with the 10 Commandments. Not counting that commandment about adultery, of course. And Hillary's claim to be aligned with the 10 Commandments has now made it a legitimate area of inquiry as to who Chelsea Clinton's real father is. And by the way, somebody got to Webb Hubble and asked him if he was Chelsea's father, and all he would say is no comment. So, normally, for me, it's hands off on the kids. But Chelsea's an adult. She's going into public life. And Hillary's saying that she's aligned with the 10 Commandments. Chelsea's parentage is now fair game. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And I just got an email. I wanted to share it with you, reminding anybody who's involved with a mutual fund that you should be looking at those numbers as well. The Russell 2000 is apparently having a bad day today, which, of course, when the stocks are down, anybody investing in them is also going to be in trouble. So if you actually have money that you have invested out there, I mean, I don't, but if you do, you should be looking at what's going on right now and making some very hard decisions. Now, getting on back to Hillary Clinton, as you know, there's been a big fight between the Freedom of Information Act regarding Hillary's email server and the State Department, which is using any excuse it can to not release any more emails until after the first 4 of the primaries and caucuses, in the hope that Hillary will have built up momentum. And that's not working, of course. So the judge who's overseeing this has now ordered the State Department to release the rest of the mails in 4 specific dates, with the final emails to be released by close of business on February 29th. This is coming from U.S. District Court Judge Rudolph Contreras. Issued the order earlier today. Now, we're looking at some serious problems there. And I am still asking that question. Was Hillary running an espionage operation out of the State Department? That's obviously something nobody wants to go near. Could destroy the entire U.S. government if the public knew that's what Hillary was doing. Certainly would end her chances of being president. And Hillary's minions are all over the web saying, this is the vast right-wing conspiracy. All of these things they're saying about Hillary, it's just made up fantasies, by Republicans and right-wingers and the rest of it. And say, but you have to admire how hard the Clintons have worked to make it look like it's all real. That's a response that tends to shut them up. Now, the State Department itself is already dealing with a cover-up on their end. Patrick Kennedy, the Undersecretary of Management at the department, claimed he was not aware that Hillary Clinton was maintaining a private server in her home while she was Secretary of State, except that emails published only last month show that Kennedy was involved in an August 2011 email exchange with 2 of Clinton's top aides and another State Department official, in which the private server was being discussed. Everybody's lying and covering up. This is a big, big, big stink. And I think it goes way beyond the email server itself. Now, it is now surfaced that at least a dozen email accounts on Hillary's private server and used by her aides were also carrying top secret intelligence. And this is very significant because whereas the Justice Department and the FBI are having to tread carefully with Hillary. They now have sledgehammers hanging over the heads of her aides, some of whom may decide that their future is best served by making a deal to turn state's evidence. So this is going to get very, very ugly. Another article coming out of Washington Post, no less. Hillary Clinton's week just went from bad to worse because now the State Department is opening an inquiry into the Bill, Hillary, and Chelsea Clinton Foundation during her time as Secretary of State. Now remember, Larry Klayman, who founded Judicial Watch, had a compelling, very strong lawsuit, RICO lawsuit, against the foundation. Unfortunately, it was assigned to a Clinton-appointed judge who refused to recuse himself over the obvious conflict of interest and threw the case out of court, proving that the justice system is really a just us system. But Hillary Clinton is now tangled up in at least 4 investigations by federal government agencies. For somebody who is so opposed to guns, she certainly seems to have a lot of smoking ones around her feet right now. All right, we're going to grab some phone calls here. Damien in New York, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael, good to talk to you. Hillary's got all kinds of problems going on. All the things you mentioned, I mean, the you-know-what is going to hit the fan pretty quick by the time March comes around because she's going to be running out of money, too. All of her donors are going to be, she's not going to get the support of the people the way Bernie Sanders is, and there's no way she could fund her campaign the way that she wants to do it. She's not riding coach like Bernie is riding coach. But what I wanted to say was the whole thing about the delegates, this is what they did against Obama. This is just a scare tactic to try to basically keep the momentum in their direction and basically say, well, why are you bothering voting for Bernie? It's a waste of a vote because the superdelegates, same thing in 2008, they were on Hillary's side, but once they saw that the people's support was with Obama, they switched their vote, and that's what they do. It's not a locked-in vote.
It shouldn't be. It shouldn't be, but Debbie Wasserman Schultz has already publicly stated that all of the Democratic superdelegates are going to be supporting Hillary. I mean, Debbie has been trying to throw this to Hillary all along to the point where a lot of Democrats are now saying it's time for Debbie Wasserman Schultz to get the heave-ho out of this situation. Now, up in New Hampshire, there are 8 superdelegates. 6 of them are saying they're going to be supporting Hillary Clinton. The other 2 are refusing to say. I guess they're a little worried about possible public outcry about that. But what people are, let me finish this up. What people are really coming to understand is the purpose of the superdelegates is to disconnect the party voters from the party central committee and to basically say, we're going to decide who the candidate will be. And I don't think that's going to sit very well with a lot of Democrats. Coming out of Iowa and the allegations of election fraud and bad behavior there, we saw Bernie Sanders' support jump as more and more people become aware of this superdelegate shenanigans. I think everybody's attitude is going to be, we have to support Bernie so much that even the superdelegates can't cheat him. But right now, if you tally up all of the superdelegates in the U.S. who have already said they're committed to Hillary, Hillary already has a 9-to-1 lead in delegates. And there's only been one caucus and one primary. And the news is still out there saying, Sanders won in New Hampshire from the delegate count, which is what matters. No, he didn't. It's at best a tie, at worst a loss. And I think people need to look at that.
Right, yeah. No, I agree with you on that. But again, this is what happened in 2008 as well. With the delegates, they flip. They can flip their vote, and that's what they do. So, I think, again, this is sort of a Clinton surrogate scare tactic to say, look,
I don't think it's a scare tactic. I don't think it's I don't think
it's not legitimate.
Okay, hey, Damien, thank you very much for the phone call. Okay. I don't think it's a scare tactic. We all know the dead body count around the Clintons. Any superdelegates who flip are risking their lives. So let's get real here. This isn't a bluff. This is real politics going on. And the American people need to understand that the party machines in both parties don't want to hear what you want for a candidate or a leader. They have arrogated to themselves through the superdelegate mechanism the authority and the power to say, no, we will tell you who your candidate is, and we absolutely demand that you support the candidate we have chosen for you. If you're a loyal member of the party, you will support the party's candidate, and so forth and so on. So we're seeing articles popping up all over the place about Hillary must be stopped, please support Bernie Sanders, and it's getting a lot of response. Now, what's really interesting, earlier in the week before New Hampshire, Hillary Clinton got a couple of her cronies, Gloria Steinem and Madeleine Albright, to come on out and try and shame women into supporting Hillary just because she's a woman. And it's kind of weird because Gloria Steinem is an icon of the feminist movement, which was supposed to be all about sex doesn't determine anything. Don't judge people by their sex, and yet here she's doing this 180 and saying, if you're a woman, you will vote for a woman, and that's all you have to think about. So they're already discrediting themselves, and that's a good thing. They're really clearly in thrash mode right now. Finally, interesting little article coming out of Global Research. The pro-Israel lobby is in a panic over Bernie Sanders beating Clinton in the popular vote. Sanders is seen as a threat to the neocons in Washington and Wall Street. So is Trump. That's why they're nervous. We got to take a break for our top of the hour news and commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645. We've got a caller waiting on the line. I'm going to take the calls when their subjects are pertinent to what we're talking about. I want to sort of keep the focus going here a little bit. All right, so interestingly enough, over at Fox News, Andrea Tantaros is supporting Donald Trump. And then she got attacked by another Fox host online, basically saying they should give her job to somebody else. So there's a huge faction fight even within the corporate media about what's going on. Now, there was a very interesting story that came out a little earlier today, and this was in the Washington Post, about Jeb Bush. And to put it in context, I want to go back to the day of the New Hampshire primary. And I had commented at the time, Fox News was running all these stories about how Jeb Bush was going to come out of New Hampshire with a new momentum, and there are other stories that are saying it's going to be the reset, you're going to be surprised tonight, and of course, it wasn't. And so they're still trying to keep him as a viable candidate. And they're saying, well, now that Fiorina and Christie have dropped out, their voters are going to flock to Jeb Bush. Sounds optimistic. And they're out there saying, you know, Jeb Bush is not dead. He's not dead. He's pining for the fjords. All righty. Now, getting onto the war zones here. Right now, we know that it's the U.S. that wants to get into Syria. And now they're trying to make it look like this is the Saudis' idea. Same stunt they pulled in Yemen. We're not making war on the Yemen people. Oh, no. You war-weary American people. The Saudis are doing it. We're just giving them the weapons and supplies with which to do it. And they're trying to basically make it look like Saudi Arabia is leading the charge into Syria. But we know that's nonsense. But we're seeing articles like this over at ROOF.com. Saudis goad Obama to invade Syria. It's actually the other way around. Seeing this article from Sputnik News about how the U.S. and Saudi Arabia discuss the deployment of ground troops. It's the Saudis. It's not our war. Really, it wasn't our idea. Now, Saudi Arabia has just confirmed they are deploying ground troops to Syria. Along with Great Britain, they're going to invade on the ground. And this is a very, very serious situation. And this is no longer about Assad or even Syria. This is about Russia standing in the way of American global hegemony, the project for the new American century. And those gosh darn Russians are refusing to play along with us. Russia's foreign minister, or actually the prime minister, Dmitry Medvedev, is saying that a foreign ground invasion of Syria could spark a new world war. Because Russia does remember the lessons of Vietnam. You cannot win a ground war from the air. And if the Saudis and the U.S. and Great Britain invade Syria, and that's what it is, because Syria has not asked them to come on in. It's just an outright, we're going to invade because, gosh darn it, we need a war to distract everybody from the economy. And Russia will probably be asked by Syria to provide ground troops in balance. And this is not going to be any kind of a war against ISIS and Al-Qaeda and al-Nusra, who are U.S. proxies anyway. This is the start of a war with Russia, a real hot war, not a cold war, a real hot war. Now, interestingly enough, the U.S. was explaining what it was trying to do in Syria in terms of the Arab Spring and all the rest of it, but documents have surfaced showing that Washington has been trying to arrange a regime change in Syria all the way back to 2003, when they were still drooling to get into Iraq. They were always saying, we're eventually going to do Syria. And remember, General Wesley Clark blew the lid off of this. He reported he had been shown a memo indicating that there was a U.S. plan to invade and conquer and regime change all of the Mideast oil-producing countries in order that that oil would trade only for the U.S. dollar and prop up the petrodollar. Now, Russia has made a proposal for a ceasefire, and Lavrov was saying we're waiting for a reaction. And the reaction was the U.S. saying, we don't think this can work, because it leaves Assad, and, we don't get what we want out of Syria, which is control of the oil over there. So it looks like we're not only on the doorstep of a massive Western economic crash, but outright real war, hot war with Russia. In fact, there was an editorial over in the New York Times, Russian intervention in Syrian war has sharply reduced U.S. options. And it's very long and convoluted, but basically what it comes down to is that the only option left is war with Russia, or we're going to lose control of Syria and its oil. To date, the U.S.-sponsored incursion into Syria has killed 11.5% of the entire population. All right, we're going to start taking some phone calls. Glenn in Pennsylvania, thank you for being so patient and waiting. What's on your mind?
No problem. Worked out well. Gave me time to change the oil in my car and get a shower.
Okay.
Kim Jong-un has really been scaring the West here, first with his haircut, and then setting off bombs underground and launching rockets into space and sending satellites tumbling through space, really been scaring and ticking off people here in the West. So the Oval Office sat down with the State Department and asked the question, what's the dumbest damn thing we can possibly do under the circumstances? And somebody said, I know, we can pressure South Korea into pulling out of the cooperation in the Kaesong industrial complex. And that'll be really the dumbest damn thing we can possibly do.
Okay, I'm going to have to ask you to watch your language. I'm not being politically correct, but we do have rules that we have to follow with the FCC, and that is you don't use bad words on the radio to prove that we're a just and moral people.
Oh, sorry about that. But anyway, I thought that one was allowable. But anyway, you get the point. So what's the dumbest thing we can do? So that's what they did. I can imagine South Korea didn't unilaterally decide, hey, let's do this thing to hurt our economy to create a provocation under the guise of a sanction. Mm-hmm. Let's hurt both of our economies. Let's hurt our diplomatic relations. So now they're pulling out. Kim Jong-un's getting rid of all the remaining South Korean workers in the Kaesong complex. He's militarizing the area. That was just brilliant. So now we have an actual serious situation when we could have just let that idiot twist in the wind, rattle his saber.
Well, wait a minute, Glenn, first of all, you need to back up. I mean, dissing the guy because of his choice of hairstyle and sunglasses is irrelevant, and North Korea has as much right to space exploration as any other country. You need to remember, it wasn't that many years ago the Koreas were talking about reunification the way Germany had done. And who went in there and put the screws on that? The U.S. government.
Right, that's what I'm saying. Yeah. They let him rattle his saber and launch his rockets and tumble his satellites dysfunctionally through space all he wants. North Korea is like an unproductive junkie who goes out and shakes down the people in the neighborhood periodically because he can't produce food or anything useful. Okay, it's a dysfunctional economy, industrially, agriculturally. It's a rabid dog on China's leash. Just let them make noise, because that's all they ever do. But instead, we've created a substantive provocation under the guise of a sanction, twisted South Korea's arm to do this, I'm sure. And this now can potentially create a real mess over there.
Yeah, well, this is the back door to getting into a war with China, because ultimately, what is driving the U.S. war agenda is dollar versus ruble and yuan. That's what they want to get rid of. They want to drag the world back to being dependent on the U.S. dollar, off of which they charge interest, or favorable importing, getting manufactured goods and agricultural produce for little more than ink and paper. And that's what's really behind all of this. Anyway, I need to let you go. We got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to go right to the phones here to John in Barbados. Thank you for waiting so patiently. What's on your mind?
Well, Michael, turning back to Syria, the report that these two A-10s bombed hospitals in Aleppo, it's looking like it's deliberate policy of the Pentagon to bomb hospitals, schools, children's homes, orphanages. It's happening too often. It's happening with your proxies in Yemen. It's happening all over the place in Afghanistan. We saw that C-130 gunship destroy the MSF hospital. I mean, this is crazy. This is just war crime after war crime after war crime.
Well, in this case, they wanted to frame Russia for the attack, and they sent the A-10s in there, and they caused a lot of destruction inside Aleppo, and immediately announced this is Russia's indiscriminate bombing. They're killing children and everything. And, of course, Syria had video of the attack, and the A-10 is a very easily recognized aircraft. And so somebody has to be desperate and in a panic to try something this dumb. Send in an aircraft that is iconic to the United States of America, cause a lot of destruction, and then say, Putin did it. It's all Putin's fault. Putin did it. Nobody bought it.
Michael, what sort of degenerate animals are these pilots that would do such a thing? I mean, as far as I'm concerned, those people should be arrested, charged with war crimes.
I agree.
And then killed in the slowest, most painful manner in front of the other pilots and their families, just to send a real message.
No, I agree they should be up on war crimes. And remember the Nuremberg principle? I was only following my orders does not work. It is actually written in the Uniform Code of Military Justice. All service people have a moral obligation and a legal right to refuse an order to commit a war crime.
Exactly.
So, yeah, that's basically it.
But I mean, this seems to be common in America's military, that these troops follow these orders without question.
Well, I'm sure what they do is they have a vetting process in order to identify pilots and soldiers and snipers who are willing to do these things. They're not just going to roll the dice and, hope that some random sky jockey thrown into the cockpit is going to do something like that. They're going to be very careful and say, this is what we need you to do. Are you willing to do it? And then I'm sure that the pilots are doing it in expectation of promotion and military decoration afterwards.
Well, I recommend that Russia now tells the American military, stay out of Syria's airspace or we'll shoot you down.
Well, that would open the door to the war that the U.S. wants with Russia. We were hearing about this possibility of a new Cold War, but at this point it looks like there are way too many players in the United States who think a hot war is the only thing that's going to get them out of their mess. Because, hey, that's what they did back in 1907. In 1929, they got out of a self-created economic disaster by getting involved in a bloody global world war. And that's where we are right now. The crash of 2008 has set the stage for World War III.
Well, unfortunately, or fortunately enough, I think America will be defeated and destroyed in nuclear fires. Russia is too big. Russia will survive, but America won't.
Well, unfortunately, with nuclear war, everybody loses. And given our current economic condition, our lack of manufacturing, manpower, the moral authority, the U.S. is going to lose this war, certainly conventionally, especially if it goes up against both Russia and China at the same time. And the U.S. could very easily lose even if it goes nuclear.
Well, the thing that I see is that America's military equipment now is so, if you like, not exactly useless, but close to it, and so expensive.
That's basically it. It's very expensive. It's not very effective. In a pure cost-effective analysis, Russia and China have the advantage. They're building very efficient, dedicated purpose weapons platforms because their goal is to build effective weapons, whereas in the United States, the military-industrial complex exists to make itself very, very wealthy at the expense of the taxpayers, and they don't care about these kids who are being sent into combat with equipment which is going to fail and result in their death. There was the big stink over the original M16.
I fear that after 2 weeks of attrition, the U.S. Air Force will be down to ancient airplanes because they'll have lost most of it. The shipping will be, the Navy, the U.S. Navy will be mainly at the bottom of the sea. And how are they going to survive a war from then? I think they're going to have to go nuclear.
Yes, that's my concern. That is definitely my concern. Okay?
But it really annoys me that these pilots can bomb these hospitals and what have you and get away with it. It makes my blood boil.
Well, mine too, but like I said, they're going to vet people who are willing to do it, and they probably just juice them up on drugs before they get in the cockpit. That's hardly a new thing. I mean, methamphetamine was actually originally developed as a battlefield drug to get the soldiers up there and energetic and, and kill crazy and just willing to obey their orders. We all have heard stories about all the medications being, they're using our soldiers and sailors and airmen as guinea pigs to test all these new exotic medications, and we don't know what they do. We've been hearing about all these new experimental drugs that affect the mind a little more specifically than merely deal with depression or anger. There could easily be a medication that's designed to stimulate anger and rage to the point of uncontrollability.
It just amazes me the moral depravity that the American military has sunk into.
Well, they inherited that from their top leadership. And that's always true of all hierarchical structures. The system inherits the manners and morals of those at the top. And when you have sociopathic war hawks at the very top, eventually the entire military just goes along with that. We've seen that time and again throughout history. And we're seeing it again written right before our very eyes. Okay? I gotta let you go. We're coming to the end of the break and commercials. So thank you very much here. And we're going to grab a real quick phone call from Mark in North Carolina. Mark, what's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Do you really think these people are mad enough that to get us into what would most likely result in maybe the destruction of mankind? That's what a thermonuclear war would be. Even these clowns, even with their bunkers, I don't see what they expect is going to come up out of what something like that.
Well, they're probably thinking it's going to be a limited nuclear war, and after all, the planet Earth didn't vanish from Hiroshima or Nagasaki or the Trinity Project or all those tests down here in the Pacific Ocean. Although that radiation is still floating around here. But when somebody gets that war fever, they're not thinking what's going to happen in the future. It's victory or death now. Got to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials. Got a bunch more calls waiting on the line, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We got a bunch of calls waiting on the line here. Maybe it's time to take this to a 4-hour-a-day show at this point with all these calls coming in. We're going to talk to Peter in California. Peter, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael. I haven't called in a couple of weeks, but the John from Barbados call kind of made me a little angry.
Yes.
We have our share of people here that will, do orders that are unlawful, and they have every right, although it would destroy their career and their families probably, but every right and duty to say no to. But I just want to point out, I just want to, and John, I'm sure you're out there listening, it really disturbs me the glee with which you seem to wish our defeat, which I have no love for what we're doing, but the glee with which he seems to, it frankly makes me angry. And I'm ashamed of our servicemen who do the Abu Ghraibs and who do the bombings that we do and all the things that we do, and he's right about that. But the British didn't even make a pretense about area bombing in World War II. At least we tried to do pinpoint. They made no pretense about it at all. They wiped out all those people in India and all the, gas attacks on the Iraqis or Mesopotamians in the 20s. They've got a long list. Anybody who's got an empire has a long list of stuff. And as a matter of fact, I'm every bit as against it as he is, but it disturbs me to hear him say, with all the glee that he says about how we should get nuked and stuff like that.
I understand and I agree, and I didn't challenge him on it because it is unfortunately an emotion and a feeling we're starting to see all around the world with regards to the United States. Now, obviously, I was born in the United States. I love the country and its people, but I think in a more objective analysis, we understand that our current system of government has grown into an oligarchy, to a fascist economic dictatorship, and I think not only the United States, but the world as a whole would be best served if that government were to come crashing down the way the former Soviet Union did.
And that I agree with as well, Mike.
Okay. Okay.
I agree. It's just, all I can say is that there's plenty of countries that have people. I mean, the Israeli pilots knew damn well who they were bombing when they bombed the Liberty.
Yes.
There's plenty of war crimes to go around. And I'm sorry, we're the top war criminals right now. There's no doubt about it.
We're number one. We're number one. Sorry.
Sorry.
I get carried away,
Yeah, but Mike, for all the horrible things I know about British foreign policy and British history, and you never wish them defeat or slaughter. So whatever,
Well, I think again, being objective, you want to see a political defeat to a failed or predatory system. And that's really what they're talking about. When people around the world are saying death to America, they're not really talking about erasing half the North American continent and 300 million people. They're talking about an opposition to government policy coming out of Wall Street and Washington, D.C. The language is a little sloppy, but that is really what they're thinking behind it. Anyway, listen, Peter, I need to let you go. We've got lots of phone calls, and I got a lot of stuff to cover yet here. We're going to switch over to Terry in Oregon. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, I agree with you and also the previous caller, but I wanted to say that wars are inflationary and they're expensive. And how do they expect to fight a war with this dollar that's going to crash, especially when we got a new budget that's $4 trillion and our deficit is probably going to be over $1 trillion, and the dollar's going to crash. And how are they going to pay for this war that they want?
Well, I am very concerned that the people inside Washington, D.C. are just in the habit of not thinking past the next news cycle, the next election, the next board meeting, or whatever. I've commented many times before about the 4 M's, which is money, manpower, manufacturing, and moral authority. And you need those 4 M's to successfully have a war, and the U.S. doesn't have any of those things. And maybe they're thinking that all of these illegal immigrants and these refugees pouring into the United States of America will immediately don the uniform of the United States and go on out and conquer the rest of the world. And I don't see that happening for 2 reasons. 1, they don't have an emotional connection to the United States of America. And 2, they do have an emotional connection to the parts of the world they're being sent out to invade. So, again, the quality of thinking that has been coming out of Washington, D.C. for the last 2 decades that I've really been paying attention, it's really very poor. These guys aren't the best and the brightest. Remember what Deep Throat was during the whole Watergate thing? Deep Throat was telling Bob Woodward about, the truth is these guys are not very bright. They're in positions of power because they're willing to lie, cheat, and steal to get positions of power, but that doesn't prove that they're actually very clever or knowledgeable about what they're doing. And we're seeing the effects of that in all these foreign policy disasters. I mean, this original plan to dollarize the Middle East, according to Wesley Clark, was supposed to be over and done with back in 2008 with the conquest of Iran. And the U.S. is having to go back into Afghanistan. They're having to go back into Yemen. They're having to go back into Libya. They still can't get into Syria, although that looks about to change. Haven't gotten into Iran yet. And what's worse, everybody in the United States and around the world knows what the U.S. government is doing. They have lost the facade of some kind of moral rightness or justification for all of this.
Yeah, and, they act like that person that's got a bunch of credit cards and he plans on bankruptcy, but he's going to max them all out before he declares.
Yes.
And then when that happens, the whole thing falls apart. If that happens during a war, then we're history.
Well, during a war, the U.S. government will borrow money from the Federal Reserve, or they'll just print it on up. And yes, it will inflate the value of the currency, which harms the ordinary people. And then what will happen is the United States will be in debt to the private central bank for another 100 years, regardless of whether we win or lose. That's why the banks love wars. They don't want anybody to be living free of debt slavery.
Right. Okay, Mike, I'm going to let you go. We got other callers on the line. I appreciate your comments. Bye.
All right, thank you very much there. All right, getting on over to Ukraine. Kiev is intensifying shellings in the Donbass to justify the call for deploying peacekeepers into the region. In other words, they fire off a lot of artillery and say, oh my goodness, there's a lot of artillery. We need peacekeepers to come on in here and maintain the borders here. Very interesting article from Russia Today. U.S. teams up with Eastern Europe to prevent Western Europe rapprochement with Moscow. The U.S. is looking with growing alarm over movements by some of the member states of the European Union to try and reestablish normal relations with Russia. And the U.S. doesn't want that. They want a new Iron Curtain. They want a big black line between Russia and Europe to keep Europe in the U.S. sphere of influence under the hegemonic domination of the U.S. dollar. And so they're trying to figure out some way they can stop all these nations who just want to abandon all of this sanctions nonsense and war nonsense and go back to peace through commerce. And the U.S. can't do that because the U.S. has got nothing with which to trade. We've lost our manufacturing in quantity and quality. Nobody wants our GMO agriculture. And that's why they're resorting to military action, to force the world back to the Bretton Woods model, where the world works and the U.S. financial system gets wealthy off of it. So, all right, we're coming up here on another commercial break. We'll be coming back here talking about more of what's going on in the war zones in Ukraine, and I have a bunch of stuff. Callers waiting on the line. We'll be back after these few words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and we're going to go ahead and take a quick phone call. Jane in California, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi. Somebody told me that Rubio is eligible because he was born in Florida, so I found online the 1790 Naturalization Act, by which he would be, but is one of those Supreme Court cases that you've talked about after 1790.
Okay, well, at this point, the issue of eligibility is focused on Ted Cruz. And I know a lot of people were concerned about Rubio because both of his parents were Cuban citizens at the time. But I'm less concerned about Rubio than I am Ted Cruz, and not because I'm necessarily concerned about the candidates themselves. It's the displayed attitude coming out of the GOP leadership that they're going to run somebody who technically does not meet the requirement to be president in the Constitution. And the situation with Cruz is deteriorating rapidly with the confirmation that both of his parents were Canadian citizens when he was born. And Canada did not recognize dual citizenship. So even though Ted Cruz's mother was born inside the United States of America, she surrendered her U.S. citizenship to be a Canadian citizen. Plus, he was born in Canada, and he doesn't meet the natural born clause. Okay?
Yeah, but was one of those Supreme Court cases that took up the natural born question, was any of those after 1790 Naturalization Act?
The Supreme Court cases were after that, but the established legal doctrine of the day had defined natural born as born inside the country. And if you go back and you look at my article on the subject,
I tried to find it and I couldn't.
All right, I'll repost it to the main page of WhatReallyHappened.com so that you can look at it there, because we're always adding new information to it from all the prevailing legal scholars of the day. So thank you very much for the phone call.
I'm specifically interested in Rubio. Thank you.
Okay,
bye.
Well, the Rubio issue is moot. He's not doing all that well in the elections anyway. But Ted Cruz, yeah, he does not meet the constitutional requirements to be a president. And in fact, with the revelation that his parents were Canadian citizens, so was he. And he can't be, a senator. Now, the one area where Rubio is going to have an issue is that there are classification laws where if you are a person with a close familial relation with people in an enemy country, Cuba, that you cannot acquire certain high-level security clearances, which a president has to have. So there's a kind of a little technicality there. I'm not worried about Rubio. I'm not even worried that much about Ted Cruz, except for, again, the arrogance of a political party machine that thinks they are above the laws of the land, the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. And we've had way too much of that in this country. All righty, getting on back to Ukraine. Former CIA official David Simpson, he's a lawyer now, is over there in Ukraine and says the Donetsk Republic is ready to defend their independence, and basically saying that Ukraine is controlled by a person recruited by the United States, meaning Poroshenko, and installed with that U.S.-backed coup d'etat in early 2014. As punishment for Ukraine saying, we don't want to be part of the European Union, we want to go do business with Russia. No, you will be a slave to the European Private Central Bank. That's what you do. Okay. Ambassador Piat, who's our ambassador to Ukraine, has actually been caught bragging about how much U.S. tax dollars they can spend in Ukraine. And apparently they're going to be committing another $25 million in additional U.S. funds. Money which, frankly, I think would have been better spent providing safe, clean drinking water for the people of Flint, Michigan. But you people in Flint, Michigan, you don't count. You're not part of the great game of global empire, so we're not going to spend any of your tax dollars on you. Now, interestingly enough, as you know, the Dutch investigation into the downing of Malaysian Airlines Flight 17 has been proceeding along. The propaganda is of Putin, 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 Putin. Moscow is now out there saying, basically, they're telling the victims' families that they have been providing technical information to the Dutch investigation, radar images, recordings, technical data on their weapons and the marks that they would leave in the fuselage, and the Dutch investigation is simply ignoring them. It's been set up to come to a pre-desired conclusion. Russia's bad, Russia's bad, Russia's bad. Now, my theory as to what happened is based on the fact that the Malaysian Airlines livery, the paint scheme on the aircraft, is very similar to Putin's presidential jet. Now, Putin's presidential plane is nowhere near as grand as Air Force One. It's based on an Ilyushin 96. But from a distance, they look an awful lot alike. And Putin was returning from a 6-day tour in South America, crossing that same airspace. And I think that Ukraine wanted to assassinate Putin, throw the government of Russia into chaos and turmoil long enough to secure the conquest of the eastern Ukrainian republics. The pilot hit the wrong target. There was a report of a pilot coming back with empty wing pylons and saying, I hit the wrong plane, I hit the wrong plane. I think that's what happened, and that's when the cover-up began. Oh, they downed a passenger jet. How can we use this to push the propaganda? Okay. There is a growing concern over talk in the United States of America about the weaponization of space. And basically, it's being referred to as a Pandora's box to cross that line. Under international treaty, there are not supposed to be weapons in space yet. There probably are, let's be honest, who we're dealing with. But there's a very compelling reason not to allow warfare in Earth orbit. When you have a battle down here on Earth and you blow up, for example, an aircraft, the pieces fall to the ground, that's the end of it. If you destroy somebody's satellite, much of that debris just goes into other orbits, and it's too small to detect on ground-based radar and track to see where it's going. You start blowing up a lot of satellites, and you're going to have all this debris carrying around, destroying other satellites, breaking them into fragments. It's going to be a cascade effect that will surround the Earth in a field of orbiting shrapnel through which nobody is going to be able to safely launch any future space flights. But again, the people who are all about war, they don't think what's happening after the war. Their entire consciousness ends with victory or defeat, and that's it. Russia is now saying that at this point they're not interested in talking about any further reduction in strategic arms because of the recent escalation in the United States of retrofitting nuclear bombs with smart guidance and refurbishing much of the current nuclear arsenal. And I think what it really comes down to is Russia doesn't trust the U.S. government, and with darn good reason. All right, we're going to go ahead and grab a phone call. Jimmy in Minnesota, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, I don't know if you caught, RT did a little video of it. Air Force General fainted while giving the, I guess, the press release of the budget for the F-35.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you caught that, but I wonder, because what makes a person faint is the shock, right? The shock of whatever they're hearing or whatever they're seeing. And I wonder if, he thought that they were getting all this stuff out of it for the money that they're using or something, and then when he actually found out how much they actually spent, and since, he's an Air Force general, he probably knows the budget for the Russian jets and the Chinese jets, and that probably really hit him hard compared to the money that we spend on the
Well,
F-35.
I don't think so. I don't think so, because that Air Force general would have read the document before he even went into that room. And the reason I didn't make a big deal about it is, he could have a medical condition. He may be drinking too much. It could be any one of a bunch of things. I don't really see it as all that significant, unless, of course, he fainted before reporting what the final budget tally is going to be, and maybe he just faked fainting, so he didn't have to tell Congress, this thing's going to cost another $16 trillion, and we're going to get a piece of crud for it. So,
but in your opinion, do you think that is a pretty big deal to faint about if you really looked at something like that?
Well, it's a delaying tactic. Maybe he just wanted somebody else to deliver the bad news to the Congress. I don't know, but I don't think it's all that important. Anyway, Jimmy, listen, I need to let you go. We got to take a break for our top of the hour news and commercials, and we will be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645. And we're going to go ahead and grab ourselves a quick phone call from Robert in Indiana. Aloha, Robert. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. It's great to hear from you. I used to correspond with you years ago about the TWA 800 thing.
Yes.
I don't remember how we did it. But, hey, I was curious of what you think's going on with the commodities, especially the gold and oil, seeing as what happened today.
Well, what's going on is the ability to control and rig these prices has broken down. And they have been keeping gold and silver down for so long. The market forces for a correction are overwhelming their mechanism. I mean, they're out there saying gold is terrible. The press is trying to propagandize people that they don't want gold, and yet everybody's out there buying it. Except for Canada. Canada is dumping theirs to correct their cash position. That's where some of the new gold coming onto the market is from the maple leaves. But, sooner or later, the law of supply and demand reasserts itself. And there's low demand for oil, and there's a market glut, and it's been made worse by the Iranian oil coming back onto the market. And you heard oil prices are almost down to $20. I mean, that's amazing. And they're propping up the price by buying oil and storing it, but they're about ready to run out of storage space. OPEC is actually considering putting a production freeze or possibly even a reduction in there to try and salvage the situation. But all of this was triggered by that very poorly thought out idea of having an oil price war as a weapon against Russia. And it did harm Russia somewhat, but Russia's economy is resilient. They've got economic activity in manufacturing and agriculture and all kinds of other things besides oil. And so they were able to weather that. Meanwhile, economies that were more dependent on oil, like Saudi Arabia, actually suffered far worse damage. So they didn't think it all the way through. As far as silver and gold, you always trust silver and gold, as long as you're not being given a fake coin or a tungsten cord bar or anything. And right now, what is driving the economic downturn is a loss of confidence in these financial institutions. The realization that it's all just ink and paper and numbers in a computer, driven by beliefs, and there's nothing of any real substantive, tangible value in any of their paper currencies or stocks or the numbers in the computer. It's all a carefully crafted illusion. Over time, illusion money has driven out the real money, and people want to get back to real money in these times.
Well, I own paper gold, in my IRA because that's the only way I could do it at the time. But I also own physical gold. What do you think the possibility of the government just outlawing possession of gold and silver is? Again, like they did, during the time of FDR.
Well, if they move forward with this idea of banning cash, they're going to have to ban precious metal ownership at the same time, or people are going to take their little plastic cards down to the local broker and say, empty the thing out and give me the equivalent in silver and gold and platinum and tantalum. And so the whole purpose of banning cash is to lock our wealth inside the banks where they can play on it. And earlier in the week, we were reporting on this leak from inside a Morgan Stanley meeting where the reason for the push to ban cash is because they're looking at 4 and 5% negative interest rate on deposits. And your money has to be locked inside their bank so they can just help themselves to it whenever they feel they need. And that's what they're pushing for. And they're not going to be able to get a ban on cash working unless they ban all other forms of wealth storage outside of their control. So, yeah, I think they'll come in together.
Right. The negative interest rates might be all good and great for the government, but, it's certainly not going to help the people with, who are trying to pay out their 18% credit card things. But I don't know. What do you think the result of a ban on cash, which, the bottom of us have to deal with, is cash. You don't have, great credit. I can't imagine not doing anything, short of, I don't know, some kind of
basically they want us all to be using, bank debit cards. They go in, buy a newspaper, swipe the card, and so forth. The problems I have with that is, first of all, we don't have something that we can stick into the G-strings of the strippers. We can't hand our debit card to a homeless person who's hungry in the streets. On a more serious note, we know that the drug cartels are going to be screaming about a ban on cash. And so we know how much influence these drug cartels have over the U.S. government. Now, Yellen apparently is out there saying that there may be some legal blocks to the idea of negative interest here in the United States of America, which will make a cash ban moot, but that wouldn't stop the government from going ahead and confiscating physical metals to give to the banks to try and save them. All of these, by the way, are obvious panic moves. Whether they call it a bail-in or negative interest rates, it's still the banks and the government looting the American people to try and prop the system up a little bit longer.
Very much so, sir. But I am, I'm not much behind you as far as age, but I am so concerned, the way this country's going.
Yes.
That, what we can do at this point. But when you're talking about banning cash, which, most of the people I know, rely on cash, and, well, a lot of them too at this point, they're, having to rely on EBT. But if we're getting to this point, I guess you'd call it the end game.
Well, yeah, it is a sign that we're getting close to the end. They're running out of things that they can do. to keep this system propped up any longer. Now, I want to basically say up front, I am not a financial management expert. If you ever saw my bank account, you would understand that to be absolutely true. But as a friend, casually, I would recommend you talk to whoever manages your IRA and try and get out of that paper gold contract, because those have been over-leveraged like crazy, and that could simply vanish, turn into a worthless piece of paper, because they're leveraged over 500 to 1 right now.
Correct. I appreciate that. When I bought those ETFs that, went into my IRA, I already had done physical gold several years before, and the highest I ever paid for my physical gold was $900.
Mm-hmm.
I made the mistake of, doing the ETF because it looked like gold was going to go up forever. So, I wanted to be able to do it in my IRA, so I bought the GLD and SLV ETFs. And of course, my portfolio is diversified, but I'm hoping the price goes up so I can liquidate those paper assets in my IRA.
Well, we're seeing gold price go up. Everybody's talking about the new gold bull market, and everybody understands that there needs to be a separation between these paper contracts and the real physical. And how they have managed to keep the price of gold down is by blending the two together, so that if gold prices start up, all they got to do is print up a whole new bunch of contracts, blend them together, and drag the price back down again. But I'm hearing that people who are going to coin dealers and brokers to buy physical metal are being charged some pretty thick premiums over the spot price, and they're willing to pay it to get that right now. But it looks like the whole thing is about to collapse, because it's all built on illusion and lies and empty promises. And you cannot run an economy on a debt-based currency and have it survive forever. It has to crash. And because of economic globalism, it is crashing everywhere pretty much at the same time. Now, it's not really a global crash, it's a Western crash, because there are already alternative systems out there that will basically prevail, which is BRICS and the rest of these people. All right, I got to let you go. We got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Now, interesting article coming out of strategicculture.org about why the United States government is so worried about the possibility of Britain quitting the European Union and going its own way. And the reason is very simple. The goal of the globalists was to start taking bunches of small countries and make these unions, and then at some point the unions would be merged into the single global government. Now, the outcome of the coming British referendum on Europe could undermine Washington's global hegemonic ambitions, and in particular its adversarial agenda toward Russia. Now, over in France, I feel sorry for the French people, what they are having to put up with right now. Ever since Charlie Hebdo, the government of France is out there screaming, freedom of speech, we defend freedom of speech, but not about Israel. And the government of France is now aware that a sizable portion of their population, especially among the young people, are not buying the official story of what happened at Charlie Hebdo or what happened at the Paris shooting. They're dealing with a crisis of credibility over there. So now France is going on the warpath against conspiracy theories. And they're basically talking about reshaping their education system to teach students this is what you believe and don't you dare listen to anybody else. Those are evil people out there spreading lies about the government. But all anybody needs to do for any of these incidences, whether it's Charlie Hebdo or TW800 or 9/11 or the murder of Vince Foster, is look at the actual hard facts and you will see they don't line up with the official stories. You can figure it out and decide for yourself. You are your own best analyst. You don't need me to tell you this stuff. You can look at it and figure it out for yourself, and it's better if you do. But France is literally talking about criminalizing any views of history that are not the official story. So, all you French people, repeat after me, 2 + 2 = 5. Egypt's foreign minister is saying that the landmark nuclear agreement with Iran now offers a new opportunity to have a United Nations-backed conference aimed at creating a nuclear weapons-free zone in the entire Middle East. Gee, I wonder who he's talking about. Who actually has nuclear weapons in the Middle East right now, this moment? Remember when Helen Thomas asked that question of Barack Obama during his first press conference, and 24 hours later, she was gone. Now, the European Union has sent a delegation down to Israel to sort of find out for themselves what's going on in Gaza, and they showed up there, and the Israeli authorities basically said, no, you may not go into Gaza. And this group from the European Union, part of the working group of the European Parliament Delegation for Relations with Palestine, they wanted to visit Gaza to assess the destruction caused in the 2014 bombing by Israel and to evaluate the reconstruction efforts paid for by the European Union. Israel wouldn't even give them a reason why they're not allowed inside. And I think the reason is more than likely that Israel grabbed the money for the reconstruction and spent it on something else. By the way, there's been another case over in Manhattan where a Jewish gentleman has been arrested for posting swastikas on door, sending phony anti-Semitic emails around. David Haddad, 56 of Manhattan. Another hate crime hoax. And you heard on the SRN Newsbreak, they've grabbed another 90-plus old, person. Oh, we've got to have a Holocaust trial. We've got to have a Holocaust trial. They're running out of real, genuine Nazis. What are they going to do? Start grabbing their children? Put them on show trials? That's all it is. Meanwhile, over in the United States Congress, the finest Congress money can buy, less than a month after the P5+1 deal was signed and implemented, and Iran is playing by the rules, Congress is getting ready to pass a series of bills to bring more sanctions down on Iran for completely unrelated things. Has nothing to do with their nuclear power. We're going to sanction them for having this rocket. We're going to sanction them for human rights abuses. Look who's talking. And of course, Israel has a huge nuclear arsenal that you pretty much paid for. And they get 27 standing ovations when Netanyahu speaks before the Congress. No government can serve two masters. And a government that serves Israel cannot, does not, and will not serve you, the American people. So please take advantage of this election to vote out all those friends of Israel's. And just tell them, if you love Israel so much, move there and run for the Knesset. A lot of head-scratching going on over why all the Oscar nominees this year are being given a free trip to Israel. And it turns out what's going on is that Israel is trying to recruit the luminaries of Hollywood to combat the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement. Oh, yes, we're going to give you a trip to Israel, and you will come on out there and say how the boycott movement is so bad, and we will help your career in Hollywood. Forgetting, of course, that back in 1933, Judea declared a boycott against Germany with the goal of crashing Germany's economy because they'd broken free of private central banking. A little bit of a double standard and hypocrisy going on there. Our boycotts are good, and the other people's boycotts are bad. Russia Today has a documentary out. We have it on the front page of WhatReallyHappened.com. The Occupation of the American Mind, and it's basically showing how all of the corporate media coverage in the United States is just polarized in support of Israel's point of view. And this documentary shows what Israel's doing to the Palestinians and how the corporate media turns a blind eye because they're under Israel's control as well. And that is just a demonstrable fact. Now, getting back to what I said about this commission from the European Union being denied entrance to Gaza, as it turns out, there's a report coming out of Salon.com. 74% of the Gaza homes destroyed by Israel in 2014 have not been rebuilt. And violent repression against the Gazans is escalating. No wonder they didn't want the European Union people in there. Story coming out of Zero Hedge. Thousands of Americans demand Obama be convicted of war crimes. It's apparently an online petition over at the White House official petition site. It's time for war crimes trials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Now, as you've already heard, the standoff up in Oregon at the Wildlife Refuge is now over. The last of the people surrendered peacefully. We avoided a bloodbath. The good news, of course, is that more and more of the American public are now aware that the Bureau of Land Management has been acting outside the limitations of the Constitution, which makes it very clear the federal government is not allowed to own land other than what is underneath federal buildings and federal infrastructure like military bases, harbors, airports, and so forth. And the Founding Fathers put that in there. So the government would not be allowed to plunder the property of the people to get out of self-created economic messes, which is exactly what's going on right now. Now, over at Activist Post, they've got an article on how the Department of Justice is preparing to step up the war on domestic extremists. Now, extremist is a word that is selected because it's got a built-in negative connotation. Oh, they're extremists. But what they're really talking about, just like in France, anybody not believing the official government story is an extremist. They're dangerous. They're potential terrorists. You've got to hate them. Don't listen to them. They'll poison your mind. Now, over in Germany, there is growing opposition to the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership. And what they're doing over there in Germany is they've got the draft agreement in a single room where only selected members of German Parliament can go in for a little while to view the agreement. They're not allowed to take scanners, cameras, pencil or paper or anything. Just here, take a look at it. There it is. You've seen it. Now you can get on out. See, we're transparent about this. And the members of the German Parliament are saying, no, actually, this is not very transparent at all. It smacks of totalitarianism, which is a comment that was being made about Obamacare when nobody was allowed to see what was inside that. We have to pass it before we can read it. Apparently, the German courts have already declared that this arbitration court for investors, a supranational aspect of the TTIP, is actually illegal under German law. And when you look at the current mess of planet Earth under the influence of the economic globalists, I think most people understand doing more of that same thing is a bad idea. Now, turning to the area of immigration, at this point, for all intents and purposes, for all practical purposes, the Schengen agreements across Europe are basically canceled. Everybody's having to put up fences, border control, trying to get this immigration problem under control. Now, down in Greece, there's a major protest going on because the government of Greece, which is bankrupt and looting its own people, somehow has the money to construct 5 centers for housing refugees. And they're putting them out on the islands of Chios, Kos, Leros, Lesbos, and Samos. And the Greek people are very upset about that. Their country is in serious economic trouble, and these refugees are being brought in. We have the same problem here in the U.S. with the illegal immigrants. We have almost 100 million Americans willing and able to work who have not been able to find a job for years. And our government is opening up the border. Sure, come on in here. We know you'll all be instant Democratic voters, even though technically you're not allowed to vote if you're not a U.S. citizen, but we're not going to be checking IDs. That would be exclusionary and racist and discriminatory. So you can go vote once, vote twice, vote as often as you can for Hillary Clinton. Now, there's been a bit of an upset in France, and it may be a spark to something major, because there was a Pegida rally. Pegida is this movement spreading across Europe to say we need Europe for the Europeans. It's not our problem to take in all the refugees who were made refugees by U.S. wars of aggression across the globe. And, of course, the police went in there and started arresting everybody, and one of the people they arrested turned out to be a former general of the French Foreign Legion, General Christian Picmal. And that triggered a major reaction. How dare you arrest this man? This is a French hero. And apparently this general spoke at this rally back on, I think it was on Monday. And he's looking at possibly a year in prison. And they're saying this could actually spark a revolt by the French people. Bring back the guillotines. Article coming out of Russia Insider. Angela Mom Merkel as the mother of all sanctions. And they're basically accusing her of basically kowtowing to the junta in Ukraine and going along with these sanctions. And these are not popular in Germany. German businesses keep calling for an end to the Russian sanctions. They are struggling and suffering. Many have gone out of business. When the sanctions were first set up, there were 6,000 companies in Germany doing regular business with companies in Russia. And they all got cut off. And they're very angry over there. And they want an end to all this nonsense. They don't want to get caught up in the middle of an argument between the U.S. and Moscow. Because they understand this next world war, just like the last two big mistakes, is going to be fought on their front lawns. And they don't want anything to do with it. But the people pushing for war don't care. The bankers want to plunge the world back into another 100 years of debt. The arms companies want to sell their product. Politicians and officers want to stand up there and in the glow of victory. And what is happening to ordinary people just isn't a factor. They're playing a global game of empire. And to people like that, you and I, our children, our homes, our businesses, they're just playing pieces. Like the little shoe that you move around the Monopoly board. If somebody steps on it and crushes it, it's no big deal. You just get another. Merkel is under criticism because she's spending more time with Turkish government officials than her own German officials. Negotiations with Turkey as Turkey gets ready to kick off more war with Syria. Donald Trump has criticized Merkel's policy, saying that this could be the end of Europe if it's allowed to go any further. And by the way, Trump is the only candidate out there saying that he wants good relations with Russia. That we should have good relations. Go back to, peace through commerce. Let's just do business and let all this war nonsense go away. Because the only people who come out of wars happy are those bankers. Okay. Apparently in Thailand, police have busted a gang that was creating and sending fake passports to Middle Eastern customers who were trying to enter Europe, and apparently was very sophisticated. The passports are very hard to detect. They were sent thousands of them. And, of course, we don't know if the people who ordered those passports are just refugees or agents provocateurs, terrorists. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Last segment of the program today here, and kind of an interesting story coming out of Los Angeles. Now, if you are from the Los Angeles area, you're probably familiar with Mount Baldy. It's a major peak in the San Gabriel Mountain range, San Bernardino Mountain range. It's a ski resort up there, and it's beautiful country. And apparently, they are suffering from unusually harsh weather. And there was this interesting story, and it involves a lady named Lisa Wall, who was hiking Mount Baldy with a friend and their two dogs last Saturday, and they discovered some inexperienced hikers who had not prepared for the harsh weather. And they called 911 and waited and waited and waited. The 911 said, help is on the way. 2 hours later, they were still there. And Lisa called 911 several more times, and 3 times they said, they've already picked him up. And she's saying, I'm standing here. We're still in the snow and ice. These people are in trouble. It took 5 hours of waiting for them to be rescued. And it turned out what the problem was. The weather was so harsh, they didn't have enough emergency equipment and helicopters to get to all the hikers who got into trouble. And that's been a big problem with this whole human-caused global warming nonsense, because local communities who are facing tight budgets are saying, oh, well, we're not going to have snow and ice this winter. We don't have to, have as many snowplows. We don't need to stockpile the road grit. We can save a bunch of money by not having this stuff. And it's nonsense. It's absolutely nonsense. Now, getting back to the environmental movement, as it were, the United States Supreme Court has now halted the Obama administration's carbon emissions plan. And basically they blocked the EPA regulations aimed at curbing carbon dioxide emissions from power plants. And it's a major blow to the human-caused global warming movement and Obama's dedication to combat climate change, which is nonsense. First of all, the whole thing is a hoax. Climate changes anyway, and it's mostly controlled by the sun, the shape of the Earth's orbit. Humans' ability to influence the climate is minuscule. But classic politicians, we're going to declare something that happens naturally, a crisis and an emergency, and we're going to offer to sell you the solution. And if you look at my ClimateGate page, you will see they have been playing this same stunt back into the 1920s. The world is getting warmer. You must do what we tell you. Oh, we're on the verge of an ice age. You must do what we tell you. Oh, we're going back to global warming. Back in 2000, they were telling us snowfalls are now a thing of the past. Tell that to those hikers up on Mount Baldy. German authorities have opened an investigation into wind energy corruption, calling it a criminal business where only a few profit. Imagine my surprise. We're getting reports here that the polar vortex will send Michigan temps below zero. Well below zero. Gosh darn that human-caused global warming. The polar vortex is back with a vengeance for Valentine's Day weekend in the U.S. and Canada. Coldest temperatures of this winter expected. There's a bright side. Your significant other is going to snuggle up that much closer to you with the cold weather. Let's see. Weekend Arctic outbreak could break records. The coldest air of the season is poised to plunge into the Northeast this coming Valentine's Day weekend. This Arctic blast will not only flirt with some daily records, but could also bring sub-zero cold to parts of the Midwest and reinforce the cold in the Southeast. Now, over in Myanmar, they've had to declare an emergency. They had their coldest weather in memory. China is looking at significant crop loss because of how cold it's getting over there. So let's get back to the Indian Point nuclear power plant, which everybody's out there saying, it's no big deal, it's no big deal, no big deal. Now we're finding out that the tritium leak from the Indian Point nuclear power station is actually 80% worse than was originally admitted to. And they're still saying, oh, it's not dangerous. It's not dangerous. There's nothing to worry about here. We're going to get Ann Coulter down here to tell you a little tritium is actually good for you. Getting back over to Flint, Michigan, and part of what is building the anger of the people is that while the children in Flint, Michigan were being given poisoned water to drink, General Motors got a special hookup to clean water. Not because the General Motors workers wanted something to drink. It turned out the tap water in Flint, Michigan is corrosive enough where it was actually etching the engine blocks. They're using machine tools to machine out the engine blocks, and they use water to rinse away the debris from the cutting head. and the water was actually harming the metal of an engine block. So we can't let that water come in contact with the engine block. But we'll just feed it to the kids here. And again, this is not just Flint, Michigan. Over in Okinawa, there's a big scandal over there because documents obtained under the Freedom of Information Act have revealed that the Okinawa water supply was poisoned by chemical leaks at the U.S. Kadena Air Base. And it's contaminated the local groundwater, the local drinking water supply. So it's all over the place here. The professor who exposed the Flint crisis says greed has killed public science. Absolutely. Corporatized science is very dishonest. And to illustrate that, we did a flashback to this story where in 1984, the Bayer Company learned that several batches of their hemophiliac medicine, factor VIII, were contaminated with HIV. And because it was illegal to sell factor VIII in the U.S., Bayer, with the permission of the FDA, exported this HIV-infected medicine to Argentina, Indonesia, Japan, Malaysia, and Singapore. So when anybody says, why don't you trust Big Pharma? There's a reason right there. There's a huge reason right there. The affordable grocery store Aldi has gone organic and is banning all toxic chemicals from their products. They're talking about trying to be GMO-free, which means there's going to be an E. coli outbreak in the grocery store. See, they're full of diseases because they refuse GMO, just like Chipotle. It's amazing here. Let's see. You know, the PC people are really out of control. Now, political correctness is basically cultural Marxism. It's an attempt to control what you think and control what you say, so that you will be politically correct. And interestingly enough, over in Florida, college students are being banned from using the words mom or dad because it's not inclusive of those people who are drifting somewhere between male and female. Now, that really is a little bit over the top. And I'm fully in agreement with Donald Trump on this. We don't have time to waste being politically correct. We're going to say what we honestly feel and conclude, and if somebody somewhere is offended by it, too darn bad. Be offended. I have a right to say what I feel. You have a right to be offended. But as that comedian, Steve Hughes, I think his name is, be offended. Nothing happens to you. It's not like you're going to actually die from being offended. What a thin-skinned bunch of people political correctness has turned us all into. Oh, they said a bad word. They said the P word or the N word or the V word or the Q word, and I have to run around in circles and do my little conditioned dance. And it is all conditioned and training. You're taught to be shocked at certain things. Brand newborn babies are not shocked by nudity, least of all their own. They're not shocked by certain lifestyles. They're not shocked by certain words. You can smile at a little tiny baby and use all kinds of profanity, and they'll smile back at you and giggle. You have to be taught all of this by people who profit from you being shocked and offended for political gains. There's the music. Time for me to get on out of here. I'm about to do an interview over at the Reluctant Preppers. We'll be back tomorrow here on the Genesis Communication Network. Until then, stay informed, stay skeptical. Share what you know with everyone that you know. We have got to stop Hillary Clinton from stealing this election. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.